are not part of places of descent or growth, and I actually agree with that. I think that there's been a giving away of those great values in favour of joining the establishment, creating wealth within those that are privileged to have that education.
Yes,
the panel.
Okay.
That, but that's certainly my view.
Are you on the side of the 27 eminent New Zealanders, though? I mean, in terms of your disposition, although your name's not on the bottom of the letter, but I mean, do you agree with where they're coming from in that respect?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the reality is that potentially it's a slippery slope when we start giving away, the freedom of speech, basics really, which is what this potentially could lead to.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Craig Duck, the barrister. All right. So further points of, I mean, there are examples that the media sees on, like Newcastle University banning students from dressing up as Caitlyn Jenner, and the University of Birmingham banning sombreros as cultural appropriation. But it is versions of it, more serious versions, are going on a lot, and we've talked about some of them on the panel in the past.
I mean, it made complete sense when you referred to former Southland Boys professor and what he was saying relating to the intent.
And one also starts to become slippery in terms of a criterion. So you'd want to see demonstrable harm. In other words, this lowers your reputation in society. We can see why, this is basically unjust to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's covered in existing law. We don't need...
Well, I look, I'm not as learned in that way as what the previous speaker is, but I would imagine that we are well covered by law in these areas, and it's a matter of actually defining and applying.
What's your position on that? Because I know that originally you said at the start of the conversation, I agree with this open letter.
Well, I just think it's like everything, that once you start saying, you can't do this, you've got to do this, it just changes everything that we do, and we won't be able to do anything. I think you've got to be able to speak your mind, as long as you're not offensive. And I mean, you can't go around being offensive, but you've got to be able to. I really believe.
I think we're on the same song sheet on this one.
Yeah,
I think all of us can see the common sense elements of it. If you're going to go after a person because of what you perceive them to actually represent based on colour or whatever, then that stinks.
Exactly.
But if you're going to go after the argument and really stimulate a philosophical debate or whatever it is, then good on you for doing so.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, you're on the same page.
Yeah.
Just before we go, the Otago University plan to identify the Loch Ness Monster.
Yep.
They're going to look for traces of unusual DNA which could belong to Nessie, because all large organisms lose cells as they move through their environments. You would know that as a private eye.
Of course they do.
You know
We're picking up cells all the time.
And so they will try and look in Loch Ness for the monster. Do you think they'll find anything?
Well, I've been there and I looked for her. I did. I did not see her. I think this is going to be good for Otago University, obviously. You're going to get a lot of publicity out of this. And let's be... I don't believe she's there. I'd love to think she was there.
I think I've got to go. I don't hear the music, but I think I'm running out of seconds.
You are.
I didn't know you'd already done this first.
Oh, I have. I've already done it.
Julia Hartley-Moore, Selwyn Manning on the panel. Thanks, everybody. Back tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, the family of a woman who died in hospital last week say they only found out via a media release today she had typhoid. A family spokesperson tells us the family feels let down by health authorities. Health authorities respond. Also tonight, a civil defence emergency is declared in Taranaki as heavy rain causes rivers to rise and a school to be evacuated, and there is more rain to come. And the bodies of a New Zealand woman and two of her children are recovered from swollen floodwaters in northern New South Wales. Why wasn't the road closed? We speak to a young man who was first on the scene and is adamant the road was open, plus that terror attack in Russia. All of that after the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Distraught family members of a woman who died with typhoid last week say Auckland health officials didn't tell them she had the disease. The woman is one of at least 15 people who've become ill in a typhoid outbreak over the past 10 days or so. She was buried yesterday, and the Auckland Regional Public Health Service says it delayed releasing information about the death to allow time for people to make the funeral arrangements. But close family members have told RNZ News they had no idea the woman had typhoid and are shocked and upset they found out only through the media. The Health Service head, Julia Peters, insists health officials have been in contact with the family and agreed with them and their church not to make the death public until today. But a family spokesperson, Jerome Mika, says that's not the case. He says the family only just found out that the cause of the death given on the certificate, Salmonella typhi, is typhoid. Mr Mika says the woman's husband doesn't speak English, and if he were told it was typhoid, he may not have fully understood because he was in so much shock. Taranaki Civil Defence says a state of emergency being declared because of the rainstorm is extremely unlikely, but people need to prepare themselves in case the conditions worse. More than 100 millimetres has been recorded at some weather stations in the region since midnight, and some rivers are rising at an alarming rate. While the rain has eased in the past couple of hours, it's expected to increase this evening and may cause surface flooding. The South Taranaki District Council has revised its peak for the Waitotara River from 16 metres to 10 metres. Taranaki Civil Defence Controller Shane Briggs says they're not evacuating anyone right now, but people need to be prepared.
We don't consider any evacuations necessary, but we are talking to the community and advising them that if the situation should change, that they need to be prepared to move if that is required. In the meantime, if they wish to self-evacuate, then obviously feel free to do so.
Shane Briggs from Taranaki Civil Defence. Meanwhile, the Whanganui District Council has set up an emergency operations centre in case conditions deteriorate. The police have retrieved the bodies of a New Zealand woman and two of her children after their car plunged into the Tweed River in northern New South Wales. Stephanie King, who was 43, lived in the town of Bulumbil but grew up in Auckland. She and three of her children were in the car when it went into the flood-swollen river at Tumbulgum yesterday afternoon. One of her daughters managed to escape and ran down the road to raise the alarm. A local resident, Dave Johnston, says the family had been helping in the clean-up from the widespread flooding in the area.
Apparently they were down here helping everybody else in the evac and cleaning up, and were on their way home.
Dave Johnston says the road next to the river where the car went off was extremely muddy. Immigration New Zealand says a woman sentenced for visa fraud systematically ripped off vulnerable migrant workers. Lorraine James was today sentenced in the Hamilton District Court to 11 months home detention and 180 hours of community work on 284 charges. James set up an elaborate scheme of forging documents and emails and fabricating letters to help 17 Filipino migrants gain work visas to work on dairy farms. The service's Assistant General Manager, Peter Devoy, says the charges represented only the tip of the iceberg of James' offending.
There was a greater depth of offending here, which was mentioned in court, but the charges represent only 17 victims in what was probably more than 100.
Peter Devoy says such fraud won't be tolerated. Westland's mayor says the District Council's chief executive has been suspended, pending the outcome of an independent investigation into her conduct. Bruce Smith says Tanya Winter was suspended with pay this morning. Last month, the council announced it was reviewing all contracts issued by assets manager Vivek Goel after reports a company run by an Auckland cake decorator won a $500,000 contract to upgrade two of its water treatment plants. Mr Smith says in January, Ms Winter alerted the SFO to Mr Goel's conduct, but she failed to tell the council about it, even as councillors continued to discuss the contracts. The mayor says the suspension relates to whether Ms Winter failed to properly notify the council. Tanya Winter says she'll fully cooperate with any investigation and she expects to be cleared of any wrongdoing. It's 5 past 5. To sport, Sonny Bill Williams' long-awaited return to the rugby field could be this weekend. The All Black midfielder is available for the Blues Super Rugby match against the Highlanders in Dunedin on Saturday. Williams hasn't played since rupturing his Achilles tendon during the All Black Sevens' unsuccessful Rio Olympics campaign. While the 31-year-old is considered fit to play, a minor foot injury could halt his return for another week. The Blues team is named on Thursday. Fears that armchair rules experts could impact the US Masters have been raised just days out from the tournament. The world golf number 8, Ricky Fowler, has joined Tiger Woods and Lydia Ko in calling for an end to television viewers being able to influence results by tipping off tournament officials. Fowler's comments come a day after a controversial decision cost Lexi Thompson victory at the first women's major championship of the year, the ANA Inspiration. Speaking ahead of this week's Masters, Fowler says any rules issues needs to be decided at the time.
Coming 24 hours after the fact, things should be handled the day of. I mean, you tee off, once you sign your scorecard, that's kind of it. There shouldn't be anyone outside of the officials being able to make this call.
Ricky Fowler, that's the news.
A terror attack.
The scenes on Russian television, absolutely horrific. The smoke-filled corridors of the metro station, the twisted wreckage of the train.
An amazing story of survival.
She was actually running, finishing, being able to get out of that car. She had quite bloody feet at that stage and was just yelling, "My mum is in the car, my mum is in the car."
A very public spat.
When you get somebody who says casual campers should be free to do what they like, they are public places. I mean, that was the response. How would you like it done on your lawn?
Around the world to your backyard. Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, from Mexico to Rimataka, can meditation transform the culture of violence in prisons? And after 10, the future of museums and pioneering new ways of transforming the visitor experience. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and there are severe weather warnings and watches in place for northern and central New Zealand. So from Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo, rain heavy at times with localised downpours and possible squally thunderstorms tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain with heavy falls easing tomorrow morning. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington and Wairarapa, rain with heavy falls, southeast gales and exposed places easing tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, rain becoming widespread overnight and southeasterlies rising to gale, heavy falls tomorrow. Westland, fine today, rain tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, mostly cloudy today with patchy drizzle in Canterbury. Widespread rain developing tomorrow, heavy in Canterbury, snow lowering to 900 metres late tomorrow. For Fiordland and Southland, mostly fine weather, and the Chatham Islands, mainly fine today, rain tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Coming up on the programme, Russia and the terror attack, the rain, and there is going to be much more of it. And the expat New Zealander and her 2 children who drowned in the flooding in New South Wales. But we begin tonight with typhoid. Later we're going to look at what it is and how common it is. In fact, isolated cases brought into New Zealand aren't that uncommon. But 15 cases that appear to be amongst the same wider family, none of whom are thought to have travelled recently, with the death of one person elevates this outbreak into something more serious and much less common. Now, today, health authorities have been criticised by politicians from both sides of the House for what the Health Minister called communication issues. Who knew this was typhoid and when? Jerome Meeker is a spokesperson for the family of the 52-year-old woman who died. I asked him when the family was told she had typhoid.
Most of the family found out through a media release this morning, and the extended family, but also the church members that went to the funeral all found out this morning. There was also some people that were sent to the wrong church, and that was my father's denominational church, but the extended family and all of them found out this morning.
So the Assembly of God in Mount Roskill, I went there this morning. That was the address I was given. That's completely the wrong church.
Yes, it was, and we're a little bit sort of disappointed with the public health for putting that up, because there's actually probably 3 or 4 Mount Roskill Samoan AOGs.
Yes.
Because they have different branches. So even that in itself was probably really poor almost felt like to the family a bit of a spray and walk away and a diversion to what they should have done from the outset.
So the wrong church was given out. The family weren't given details of the fact that their loved one had been suffering from typhoid until a media release came out this morning. How would you describe the handling of this?
I think that the Ministry of Health have failed, not only the family, the immediate family, but also just the extended family. In terms of someone sort of protocol, even for people not to be notified that the deceased had sort of passed away as a result of typhoid, there were no precautions or anything to make people aware of that. And from what I understand, even the undertaker wasn't aware that the person had died of typhoid.
And people were visiting her in hospital, holding her hand, wiping her brow, all those sorts of very human things?
I know the family members did, and I think the question is because there were people that were there with her when she was alive, were also at the funeral. So we're still trying to understand the extent of whether people have been exposed to typhoid. And as we speak, there are family members and church members going to contact their GP and visiting just to understand whether they were exposed to typhoid. So it's really, really disappointing, the fact that they failed to notify and communicate that to not only the immediate and extended family, but also the church family that were there to grieve their loved one at the church service. A lot of people weren't aware of this.
Jerome, can I clarify this? You believe that the family knew that typhoid was involved in this was via a media release this morning?
Yes.
Jerome, can we broaden out this lady, the deceased? In what way was she connected to the other people who've been infected with typhoid?
I understand that they're loved ones. I don't want to get into the specifics of it at this stage because we're still trying to get over the fact that that their loved one had passed away with typhoid. We are trying to get to all our sort of family members, but also church and extended family. So, we're still trying to work through that because we're not sure how far or how widespread this has gone in terms of the family and extended family.
Were they all in one house or one dwelling or living in close proximity to each other?
I can't get into the specifics of the family and that, but all we can say is like a lot of them weren't made aware of it, that it was typhoid until this morning. And, we're really disappointed at the fact that just the awareness of of typhoid was not sort of registered on the radar of our family members. And a lot of them are quite shocked in terms of working through that and then asking whether my aunties or uncles were exposed to that. All that stuff wasn't communicated to friends and family, and that's probably the biggest disappointment in this whole saga, is the failure of the Ministry of Health to be able to notify extended family, but even be aware of some of the cultural sort of aspects of our culture and how we sort of grieve our loved ones.
That's family spokesperson Jerome Mika. The Auckland Regional Public Health Services Clinical Director is Dr. Julia Peters. A few minutes ago, I asked her if this situation was acceptable.
We have worked closely with the church community and the family during the period since the person died. The woman died tragically. Our main point of contact has been through the church minister, and that is how we have come to our agreements with the family and with the church community about how to proceed.
I've just spoken to a family spokesperson, Jerome Mika, who tells me that the family found out this morning via a media release that their loved one died of or with typhoid. And their sense is that there has been little or no communication at all.
So, John, just to clarify, our role in public health is to contain the outbreak. When the woman died in hospital, the family would have been spoken to by the doctors who were looking after her in the critical care department. So that is a clinical role, and it is then over to the family that has that information from the clinical staff to share that. We are not at liberty to be giving personal, private information to other people. That is not our role in public health.
Who is overseeing this, though? We know that typhoid is infectious.
Yes.
We know that this is a public health issue.
Yes.
We have been told by a family spokesperson that they did not know there was typhoid. This is a person who was dying surrounded by family members. This is a person who lived in close proximity to family members. This is a person who was engaged till the end of her life in close proximity with church members. Who was responsible for notifying these people as a public health issue that they had potentially been exposed to typhoid?
So, John, when people have an infectious illness, if they tragically die, then our role is to interview the family about what their activities were and with whom they were in contact in the incubation period for the disease. So,
right. So you did that?
So just let me finish. We get notifications every day like this. I mean, not ones tragically that end like this. And that is our role. When obviously a person is alive, we interview them and we get the contacts from them. When we knew that this outbreak was not just, when we knew the people were affected, that it was more than just sporadic cases, that there was an outbreak, we notified all the health services in Auckland and we notified the public through a media statement on Friday night. Now, in terms of, so anyone who has been a close contact of people who are cases in this outbreak will be hearing from our team. If they haven't heard from our team, it's because their name hasn't been provided to us.
Right. Who were you getting the names from? If a family spokesperson tells me that no one knew typhoid was involved, who did you interview and who was in charge of going to the family, going to the church congregation and saying, look, there is a risk of exposure here? Who was running that?
Hang on. We have visited the minister of this church on at least 3 or 4 occasions.
Right. What about family members? What about family members? Because with all due... Well, no, hold on a sec.
Let me finish. We also came to an agreement with the church that we would hold off fully engaging with the congregation whilst they got through their funeral processes, which happened over a 3-day period. That was a request that was made to us by the minister on behalf of the congregation on Friday.
Right, the congregation who include family members who seem, according to a family spokesperson who was very certain of this, to have known absolutely nothing about it. So you were having conversations with a minister which weren't being relayed. I'm interested in who spoke to the family. Set the minister aside, who spoke to the family?
Every family. So I would hope that the clinicians, when...
You would hope?
Well, John, I am not the treating physician for this person.
No, but this is public health. This is a public health issue.
It is. I am not the caregiver for this woman. No, you need to let me finish. The family would have been spoken to in the Department of Critical Care. That is where the information about the cause of death needs to be conveyed to the family. We have a really careful balance in public health around privacy. We have to do everything we can not to be giving the personal information of cases out to other people. Now, if there is someone we should have spoken to with whom we have not spoken, I do apologise. But on a daily basis, I am balancing up what is a proportionate response in these situations. From the perspective of the public health of the people of Auckland, I was comfortable that giving the church that time to go through the burial processes was okay, because at the same time we were able to continue with our public health role.
That's the Auckland Regional Public Health Services Clinical Director, Dr. Julia Peters. The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint tonight. The 52-year-old woman died last Tuesday. He says his ministry was first made aware of the typhoid outbreak on Friday, just after 2 p.m. He says he expects information about outbreaks of this kind to be released in a timely and appropriate way.
They'd have to explain why they didn't release it sooner, but look, there may be family reasons why they didn't, but I think around issues like this, typhoid, obviously that very word concerns people, and so it's important that communications in this sort of instance are really clear.
Jonathan Coleman, who declined our invitation to be interviewed tonight, but was speaking to reporters at Parliament earlier this afternoon. After 6 o'clock tonight, our reporter Zach Fleming takes a look at how common typhoid outbreaks are in New Zealand, how contagious typhoid is, and how it is treated. It's 21 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Taranaki Civil Defence is urging people in some areas to prepare to evacuate if the rainstorm worsens. More than 100 mils of rain has fallen in parts of Taranaki, causing the Waitotara River to rise rapidly and forcing the small Ngā Matapori school to send its students home. State Highway 4 and Inland Manawatu has been closed up to the Whanganui River, as has Waitotara Valley Road. Shane Briggs is the Taranaki Civil Defence Controller, and he's on the line with us now. Hi Shane, lovely to talk to you. What's the weather like as we speak?
It's very wet and windy, as you can expect.
Yeah, and more rain is coming, right?
That's correct.
Okay, how bad is it? I said before the news you were going to declare a civil defence emergency. You're not, are you? Which gives me some comfort.
Yeah, we're not intending to declare. We don't see a need for that. We are sort of coordinating and leading the response, working with our district councils, community and emergency services.
Okay. Flooding conditions in some areas, obviously roads have been closed. How bad is the flooding in the worst spots?
Look, Waitotara Valley has a history of flooding.
Yep.
And so, that's in this sort of situation, that's not unexpected. The biggest concern for us was how severe that was going to be, given that high tide is also this afternoon and the water coming down, and what may happen tonight with a second wave of heavy rain forecasted.
Okay, so at the moment it's behaving pretty much as you expect. Do you have fears it's going to get seriously worse?
I wouldn't say we have fears, but obviously we want to continue to monitor that. We haven't requested anyone to evacuate, but we have said to the community if they feel that they wish to self-evacuate, by all means do so. But also be prepared that should the situation change tonight with the extra rainfall and the river's already been full and the ground saturated, then they need to be prepared to move if we'd ask them, because if we do so, it's because it's a serious issue.
Okay, how do you ask them? If people are listening who are in the Taranaki region and they absolutely want to keep an eye on where Civil Defence is standing, what's the best way of them going about it?
Probably the easiest way to keep informed with us is either through our social media accounts, through Facebook or Twitter, or our website, or of course listening through various news outlets where we're obviously providing information.
Thank you so much. Nice to talk to you. So at the moment, as you heard from Shane, things going reasonably well in Taranaki despite very heavy rainfall. No evacuations have been ordered, some road closures, but if you are there, do keep an eye on the situation. The bodies of a New Zealand woman and her 2 children have been found in northern New South Wales after their car was swept away in the swollen Tweed River yesterday. Former Aucklander Stephanie King, her 7-year-old son Jacob and 11-year-old daughter Ella Jane drowned when their car plunged into floodwaters. Another child, 10-year-old Chloe, survived. Among those first on the scene was Tom Grinham and his father Matt, a former Highway Patrol officer. They realised something was horribly wrong as Chloe came running towards them.
She was running down the road as we pulled up. She's 10. She's the middle child. Her older sister and younger brother are in the car. But I really don't know how she got out of the car. I don't know if she was thrown out or if she was pushed out or if she jumped out. But, yeah.
Tom told me the floodwaters in the town of Tumblegum had receded and there were no warning signs on the road.
There was mud all over the road, but there was no road closed signs or dangerous road or anything. There was just mud all over the road, and she slipped in the mud.
And so there was nothing whatsoever. So she could have easily thought this was just surface water, could she?
Yeah. She didn't drive through any flood water. She only drove into mud that had come with the flood because the water had gone down.
And then the car just disappeared beneath the surface.
It looks like by her car tracks in the mud, that she slipped and launched out over the bank into the water.
And so your dad, obviously, he just jumped in, did he, looking for the car?
Yeah, with two other blokes.
Tom says his father and those two other blokes spent 15 minutes or so in freezing water, feet first, simply trying to locate the car beneath them, but they were forced to give up after air bubbles disappeared. And in Tom's dad's case, his own life was being put at risk. Police have said the road was closed and there were warning signs, but Tom strongly disputes that.
It was open, not closed. The police made up that the road was closed. I got swarmed by media this morning when we were back in Tumblegum helping out, and they were all asking if there was any road closed signs. The only time road closed signs got put up was after that road had been turned into a crime scene.
So the police said it was closed, and you are absolutely adamant it wasn't closed until after the car went under the water?
Yeah.
Your dad...
I know it for a fact.
You know for a fact. Your dad was a highway patrol officer for how long?
23 years.
And what's he saying about the circumstances in which this occurred? Has he expressed an opinion about the fact the road wasn't closed?
Yeah, he agrees. The road was definitely not closed.
That's Tom Grinham, who was one of the first on the scene after the tragic accident which claimed the lives of former Aucklander Stephanie King and her two children, Jacob and Ella Jane. It appears their car slid in mud on the road. Tom is insistent the road wasn't closed and went into a flooded and a swollen and fast-moving river. Meanwhile, the extent of the flood damage elsewhere in New South Wales is devastating as thousands of residents return home to find they have lost everything. In the small town of Chindera, dozens of caravan park residents have come back to find sewage and diesel washed through their sodden homes. The ABC's Annie Guest spoke to some of them and sent this report.
Outside, a team of young helpers is loading a truck full of Bob Gordon's sodden belongings. Inside, dry mud covers his caravan and cabin home.
Is this the worst you've seen it?
This is the worst, yeah. The last time we came in here was in 2011, I think it was. It came up to about there.
And paint us a picture of the damage now.
Well, the whole bed inside's gone. It's on the kitchen floor, it's gone.
There's a big hole in your kitchen
floor.
It's
just rotted away. The wardrobe's out, all the sheets and that are all wet, but you can't put them out anywhere. The drying's all too wet.
Bob Gordon has lived here since 1980 at Chindera's low-lying Gateway Caravan Park by the Tweed River. The 79-year-old had thought his electronic equipment would be safe up high.
We had the TV here in this corner, plus the DVD and that, the player. When the water pushed its way through the breeze right here, it started to circulate because the whole lot fell into the water overnight. We didn't know about it until the next morning.
Do you have insurance?
Yeah, but it'll never cover that, I don't think.
What will you do?
We don't know yet.
He's staying with a friend down the road for now. Some have insurance, but others among the poor, elderly or frail here feel they have limited options. Some who don't want to talk publicly have moved back in, despite the flood having washed sewerage and diesel through their caravans and cabins late last week. Their spirits are lifted when they see sisters Jordan and Caitlin Armitage.
Just cook some sausages and bread for them all. Yeah, just trying to feed everyone while we're all doing a clean-up. So.
But you guys didn't escape unscathed at your place either?
No, we didn't. None of us did.
Can you describe the damage at your place?
We've got the floorboards gone and a couple of cupboards and beds, but other than that, we're pretty good.
So you've been cleaning up at your place, and then what made you decide to cook up this feast and take it round to your neighbours?
Because everyone's hungry and needs a feed, so sure we can stop for a half an hour and feed everyone else, so it's good.
And what sort of responses are you getting from people as you go around?
Some of them are saying thank you.
Some of them don't want to eat. So.
Too stressed to eat.
Yeah. But we're trying to feed everyone.
The sausage's aroma is a welcome change from the muddy riverine smell permeating the caravan park as people drag their ruined things into piles on footpaths. They want it done, but one resident tells me she reluctantly has to leave it and go to her job as a cleaner because her employer won't give her the time off. There are 250 people in the two Chindra caravan parks, and the managers estimate more than 60% of homes are flood devastated.
Coming up on Checkpoint, the weather, no state of emergency in Taranaki, but one has just been declared in Whanganui. Mayor Hamish McDowell will join us live. A terror attack in Russia. Lani Hagerman tells the jury in Andrew Little's defamation case, Lani Hagerman, sorry, she doesn't want to bankrupt him despite seeking more than $1 million in damages from him, and Wellington looks to increase its inner-city parking charges for the first time in 13 years to $4.50 an hour. Speaking of money, Nona with business too, but first Katrina with the headlines.
Distraught family members of a woman who died of typhoid last week say Auckland health officials didn't tell them she had the disease. The 52-year-old woman is one of at least 15 people who've become ill in a typhoid outbreak over the past 10 days or so. A family spokesperson, Jerome Mika, told Checkpoint the family had only just found out via a media report this morning that the cause of death on the certificate, Salmonella typhi, is typhoid. Mr Mika says he understands even the undertaker didn't know she had typhoid. A state of emergency has been declared in Whanganui district after the river rose to 10 metres near the township of Piperiki, just an hour and a half's drive from the city. The Mayor, Hamish McDowell, says the river is now threatening to break its stop banks and there's likely to be flooding. The council is predicting the river will hit 17 metres at the Piperiki recording station around midday tomorrow. That would be 2 metres higher than in 2015 when there was widespread flooding. Taranaki Civil Defence says a state of emergency being declared is extremely unlikely, but people need to prepare themselves in case conditions worsen. The peak for the Waitotara River has been revised downward from 16 metres to 10 metres, and the Civil Defence Controller Shane Briggs told Checkpoint residents have not been asked to evacuate from the Waitotara Valley. However, he says they need to be prepared to move if the situation changes tonight. The police have retrieved the bodies of a New Zealand woman and 2 of her children after their car plunged into the flooded Tweed River in northern New South Wales. Stephanie King lived in the town of Bilambil but grew up in Auckland. Westland's mayor says the District Council's chief executive, Tanya Winter, has been suspended pending the outcome of an independent investigation into her conduct. Last month, the council announced it was reviewing all contracts issued by assets manager Vivek Goel after reports a company run by an Auckland cake decorator won a $500,000 contract to upgrade 2 of its water treatment plants. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thank you so much. The latest on that state of emergency in Whanganui coming up. Also Russia and the terror attack in St Petersburg. But Nona Peltier is sitting beside me to talk about business confidence fallen to its lowest level in a year, according to a new quarterly survey.
Yes.
I think we heard something similar last week too, didn't we?
Yeah, so this is the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research. They do a kind of a consensus survey looking at various opinion surveys, and they've come up with this number which says that optimism in the economy has fallen to 16%. That's a seasonally adjusted number, by the way, from 26% in the last quarter of the year. So there's a big fall over the last 3 months.
Do they say why?
Yeah, it's really about the cost of hiring staff and or even just finding staff in the construction sector particularly, as well as just rising costs. One thing that's interesting in this survey was that, again, we've seen this in other surveys, that people's own business outlook. So in your business, your outlook is quite positive, and that we've seen that holding steady across all sorts of surveys.
So the same people who have a declining sense of confidence about the broader economy are retaining confidence about their own business performance.
Which really is the thing that matters the most in the end, because as long as you're feeling confident about your own prospects, chances are things are pretty good. But when you look at the overall economy, you look at geopolitical risk, it's an election year, it's not surprising that people's outlook is a little bit less strong than it was. I mean, that makes sense, I suppose, if you think about it. It's logical. On the other hand, which is quite interesting, is that the inflation expectations are rising.
And inflation rises when?
Businesses feel more confident about passing on price increases to consumers, and that's particularly so in the construction sector. So housing prices and fixers, you're seeing it, right? Yeah, I mean, I think most people probably who own a home and who are trying, or even I guess if they're renting, they're probably starting to feel that pinch. And
the fact that they're renting is actually indicative of the fact they can't afford to buy a home, right?
Right, and that means that the Reserve Bank is going to feel a little bit more comfortable that their inflation target, which is the middle of that 1 to 3% band, 2% is looking a little bit more likely now in the future, and that means that interest rates are likely to go up. According to this latest survey, the expectations that we go up the middle of next year. So you got a little bit more time to pay down your debt.
Right,
yeah.
Thanks, Nona. What else? It says, I love this phrase, a war of words.
That's right. Quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
And numbers too, words and numbers. From a major shareholder in a company called NPT. We talked about this.
Yeah, Giles talked about this last week, right?
Yeah, and it keeps going on. Okay, so NPT have made this deal with Kiwi Property, which is the largest listed property investment development company in New Zealand. Very well-run company, own a lot of really good buildings. Diversifying into management somewhat. And Augusta Capital is another company, came through last year and said they would like to do a deal. They took a shareholding in NPT and then wanted to do a deal where they would take over the management, and NPT did not like that at all. Instead, they turned around and did a deal with Kiwi Property after receiving some other interested parties. So in the end, their shareholder, though, their large shareholder, Salt Investments, they own 17% of the company. They don't like this deal at all. No, they don't. And so back and forth, back and forth. We're going to have a meeting of the shareholders coming up. It should be quite interesting. And Salt is saying to other shareholders, do not accept this deal. It's a terrible deal. It's an awful deal. It's going to dilute the value of the company. NPT is saying, oh my gosh, we're so surprised because Salt liked our deal originally. Well, it's all changed around. That's the world of business today.
Yes, it is. Thanks so much. What happened on the markets?
Well, actually, we ended up again about 0.25% on the NZX Top 50 Index, so that's still quite strong. That's to 7,245. The New Zealand dollar is steady at 69.9 US cents. 92.2 Australian and 56 pence.
Nona Peltier here in the Auckland studio. Thank you so much. It's 22 minutes to 6. Let's return to flooding in New Zealand now. A state of emergency has been declared in Whanganui, the district, after the river rose 10 metres near the township of Petersburg. Beautiful part of the world, a long way north up the river, about an hour and a half's drive from downtown Whanganui. We're crossing now to the Mayor, Hamish McDowell. Hamish, are you there?
Hello, John.
Nice to talk to you. What?
Yeah, the same.
Yeah, is it raining cats and dogs at the moment? Is it?
Yeah, look, it's been a fun day because the rain lightened off mid-afternoon and the hydrology reports weren't bad. The river at Petersburg had stabilised to about 8 metres, which is doable. But we've just at 4:30 we got a updated report. Again, it's only modelling, but suggesting that. Tomorrow, about 1 o'clock, it'll be rising to about 17.7 metres.
Holy moly!
Yeah, it's historic levels, really. So
when did you last see it that high? You never.
I've never seen it that high. So the June 2015 floods were at 15 metres at Petersburg. So it's potentially again. It's we can hope for the best, but potentially worse than the inundation then.
Yes, and it's years since I've driven up there, but I remember it vividly. The road is very low to the river and the communities are along the road, right? So what does that mean in terms of flooding? Is it just, if it gets to that level, will it be going through lots of homes.
Yeah, I thought, look, most people on the river, having lived with it, so most people in the river valley will be well above the flood line. But it's sadly, Whanganui is built on a floodplain, and so the reality is that the places that were affected last time, Anzac Parade and other streets in Whanganui East, and downtown Typhoid and the bottom, what we call the bottom block, and also Putiki will almost certainly be flooded tomorrow.
So it's not going to be a wall of water because it's not a tidal wave, but there's just going to be very, very heavy, high levels of water coming south towards the coast, and as they pass through the city, you're expecting flooding there.
Yeah, under the modelling, it'll overtop the stop banks tomorrow. So what we're doing is getting people, first of all, prepared in their heads to evacuate. And I really feel sorry for those who did this only 2 years ago. We do have the luxury of time. We don't have to worry of immediate danger, but we're telling everybody to be out by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So pack up your precious things, find your pet, a good home and high ground, check your neighbours and be gone by 10. Already teams are going out their door knocking at the moment.
We spoke to a lot of people in New South Wales and Queensland last week who didn't receive the warnings that they wanted, this kind of advance warning, and it's good to tell people, and even if they go and the flooding's not that bad, it's better to be safe than sorry, right?
Too right, and look at Kaikoura. Everyone self-evacuated up the hill, and only 2 people lost their lives. It's that kind of proactive self-evacuation. But if people are self-evacuating, they've got to leave a note, preferably with us, at one of the civil defence welfare centres that are being set up. So if I can just do a public service message, east side, that's Whanganui Girls College, and over in the town, that's at Guyton Street at the St Paul's Church Annex, opposite Council.
Speaking of the college, will schools be closed, particularly in the low-lying areas along the river?
Yes, so the main affected schools, Girls College, I think the girls have got a day off tomorrow, and I'd imagine most of any Whanganui school should be closed, and anyone who's sending their children over the bridges tomorrow shouldn't. Stay home, keep them safe, and because the reality is the peak is meant to be at 1 o'clock tomorrow, which should mean that the peak in town is somewhere between 7 and midnight. But the reality is we've been conservative in saying let's shift all those time frames earlier because water's unpredictable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has been.
You've mentioned that people are being flooded for the second time in 2 years, right? Or yes. Is there a bigger picture here? Do you actually have to look as the climate changes and we're going to get more and more of this kind of stuff at levees, at doing something to prevent this becoming common?
Yeah, well, look, there seems to be 2 choices. One is to raise the stop bank to up, but even a 200-year stop bank wouldn't hold back a 400-year flood.
Yeah.
Raising houses a la Queensland. You go there and most people have stilts as their bottom floor. So I'm not one to offer a solution at the moment. But yeah, look, the wider context of climate change needs to be grabbed and addressed wholesale.
Mayor Hamish McDowell, good luck over the next 24 hours. We wouldn't mind checking in with you tomorrow night. Would you mind if we did that?
Not a problem.
Okay, lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much. It's 16 minutes to 6. Let's go to Russia now. A suicide bomber is believed to be responsible for an explosion on a train in St Petersburg, which has left 11 people dead and more than 50 injured, many of them critically. The death toll is expected to rise for that reason. The bomb tore through a train as it travelled between 2 stations in the city, but as Justin Gregory reports, investigators have since found a second undetonated bomb, which was much larger, and it could have been very much worse.
The chaotic aftermath of a deadly explosion in St Petersburg. The train doors have been ripped apart and passers-by desperately search inside for injured passengers. Across the platform, amateur video shows blood splattered on the ground and victims lying on the station floor. Russian authorities say remains found at the scene suggest a suicide bomber was responsible. The blast killed 11 and injured more than 45 others. Train passenger Natalia Kirilova recounts the moment the bomb went off.
There was a huge bang. It was deafening, and I was sitting next to a metal railing, and I think it saved my life. Everybody fell to the right, not down to the floor, but on the seats.
She said the train carriage collapsed as passengers climbed out on the platform, and everything went black before she heard another explosion.
When I turned back and looked, there was a huge number of people lying there. There were dead bodies. It was scary. And when we left, they took out several people covered in blood. There was a woman, her whole face and nose, all of it was a large wound. It was deafening.
Outside the Sinaya Ploshad metro station, bystanders gathered and helicopters hovered. Olga was a passenger on the train behind the one that blew up.
We stopped at Sinaya. We were told to get out first and wait because there was smoke. There was some smell, but everyone was calm.
This man got off the same train.
I came out and a metro employee at the interchange asked if there were men willing to help carry dead bodies.
In the United States, the White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer told media President Donald Trump had sent his condolences to President Vladimir Putin.
The United States condemns this reprehensible attack and act of violence. Our thoughts and prayers are with the injured and with the Russian people as we extend our deepest condolences to the loved ones who have been killed and injured.
Vladimir Putin, who was in St. Petersburg as part of his re-election campaign, visited a makeshift memorial at the metro station, laying a red carnation for each life lost. A second bomb, disguised as a fire extinguisher and loaded with shrapnel, was discovered by authorities at another metro station. There is speculation the device, which was not detonated, was intended as the main attack. For Checkpoint, I'm Justin Gregory.
Lani Hageman says she doesn't want to bankrupt Labor leader Andrew Little, despite claiming $1 million damages from him in a defamation case. The case in the High Court of Wellington relates to Little's release of a press statement linking the award of a contract for managing a resort in Niue to Earl and Lani Hageman's Scenic Hotel Group and a donation the couple made to the National Party in September 2014. Our court reporter Anne-Marie May filed this report.
The jury heard today that the Hagemans declined a $26,000 offer from Andrew Little. Lani Hageman said that was based around $15,000 for court costs and $11,000 to meet the $250,000 she had paid in legal fees. She told defence lawyer John Tizard that she had no idea of Mr Little's financial position, but she wanted the jury to award as much as they could for damages.
My husband is dying in Christchurch. I'm fighting for his reputation, and Mr Little has had every opportunity for 12 months to come back to me. I just have no understanding how you can stand here to try and make me out to be a really bad person, because I think we should ask for damages when he's had every opportunity to do it for next to nothing.
Mrs Hageman said while Andrew Little had not made further claims against them, the damage was already done.
We had been written about. There's over 90 publications. I noticed, with all due respect, Mr Tizard, that when it came to Mr Little's latest apology, there were 17 media reports, as opposed to over 90, which slurred our name and connected us to corruption.
John Tizard suggested to Mrs Hageman that his client had made his statement as part of a constitutional duty to challenge the government's actions, but she disputed that.
He put a slur against us. We are not the government. So if he issued his press statements in discharge of that duty, what is his duty to us? Why is he slurring our name? Why is he ruining our reputation?
Lani Hageman said she had expected Andrew Little to ring her and apologise, but the first she knew about any apology was when a newspaper contacted her for comment on it. The defence lawyer also asked her why she was not taking action against the media companies who published Mr Little's alleged defamations.
My fight is not with the media. My fight is with Mr Little. He's the one that called us corrupt. The media may have repeated it. He's the one that called us corrupt. It's him that's ruined our reputation.
The Hagemans are seeking a maximum of $2.3 million in damages for Mr Little's remarks. The trial continues tomorrow. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
Well, let's stay in Wellington. Nona was talking about inflation earlier. Wellington's going to get an example of it. An increase in its inner city parking charges for the first time in 13 years. The new hourly fee of $4.50 for parking within the CBD is proposed in the council's draft annual plan. If the 50 cent an hour price hike gets the go-ahead, the council would reap more than $500,000 each year, 50 cents at a time. Edward O'Driscoll reports.
The decision to hike parking fees is up to Wellington City councillors, but here's what the capital's residents think about paying $4.50 an hour to park.
I think that's too much. You look at other places in New Zealand and it's nowhere near that high. I mean, I know we are the central city, but you've got to keep it affordable for people.
I'm not in favour of it. I think parking costs enough in Wellington as it is already. I think a small increase to ratepayers' rates is probably a better way to go if they need to generate some more revenue.
I think that's probably all right. It's better than a congestion tax.
It's just so expensive to park here, and some people don't have access to public transport, or public transport is so expensive.
The council's Revenue and Finance Working Party is recommending the fee increase, saying if it's not implemented, it would translate into a 0.2% increase on rates. Councillor Andy Foster says increasing parking rates is the best way to generate revenue.
If we don't raise money in this way, then that essentially that cost goes on the rates. Some people will obviously say, well, why can't you cut costs? And of course, we're always looking at how we can reduce the cost of delivering services. So, it's one of these, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Andy Foster says they considered inflation and compared the fees in other major centres. The change would match Auckland's hourly fee, but would be more than double the price charged in Tauranga, Hamilton and Christchurch, which is about $2 an hour. Councillor Foster says it's been about 13 years since parking changes last went up.
We have looked at them from time to time, and the feedback has generally been, don't you dare. So, these things, as I said, these things are not easy. People don't like paying more for things, but whether that's rates or user charges or reductions in services, none of them are very popular.
Wellington's inner city retailers say a parking fee increase won't affect their businesses. Chris Wilkinson, the director of First Retail Group, says Wellington is under stress in terms of parking.
We've lost a number of car parking buildings, some temporarily and some permanently. Wellington's been in a similar situation before through earlier quakes. So it's something that the city's managed quite well and consumers have dealt with quite well. So we don't think it's going to be a big factor.
And he says it's a realistic option.
When we look at the pricing, where it's heading, it's certainly relative with other metropolitan cities in New Zealand. Looking at Auckland, for instance, $4.50 an hour. This brings it in line.
Councillor Andy Foster will ask the Long-Term and Annual Plan Committee to support the recommendation at its meeting on Thursday. If approved, the public will then be given the chance to have their say. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, Edward O'Driscoll.
A Filipino New Zealander has been sentenced to home detention and community work for visa fraud involving Filipino migrants wanting to come to New Zealand to work in the dairy industry. Lorraine James from Te Araha masterminded an elaborate scheme of forging documents and emails and fabricating letters to help 17 Filipino migrants gain work visas. She was sentenced in the Hamilton District Court today to 11 months and 2 weeks home detention and 180 hours of community work. Our reporter Andrew McRae was there.
James lawyer Roger Laybourne said his client had altruistic motives to help other Filipinos and was not seeking commercial gain, as alleged by Immigration New Zealand. But Judge Kim Saunders had a different take.
Your offending was premeditated, it was planned, and it did involve an element of financial gain.
The judge accepted James wasn't living an extravagant lifestyle, but pointed to the scale and nature of the fraud.
Significantly, your offending went to the very heart of the integrity of the New Zealand immigration system.
Immigration New Zealand says James systematically ripped off vulnerable migrant workers. Assistant General Manager Peter DeVoy says the victim is the New Zealand public.
The systems that immigration have in place to protect New Zealand, to protect the border, which have been the subject of the offending, more so than the 17 victims named in the case.
Mr DeVoy says the message from the sentencing is similar fraud won't be tolerated. He says while it happens from time to time, the scale of James' offending was different.
This case, where you have 284 charges across 17 cases that we investigated, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. There was a greater depth of offending here, which was mentioned in court, but the The charges represent only 17 victims in what was probably more than 100.
The 17 Filipino migrant workers caught up in JAM's fraudulent scheme have since obtained visas to work on New Zealand dairy farms. In Hamilton for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tierney.
It's been a fairly heavy old hour thus far, so we're going to escape in something rather lovely. A Kapiti Coast artist says she's booked up for weeks after publicity about her work creating replica miniature pets has gone global. Diana Stevens started making pet mementos using needles, wool and wire about 18 months ago after she contracted a nasty virus, and doctors said rest. Since then, her business Heartfelties has, well, had international publicity, and orders have come from as far away as London.
The reaction that I get's really overwhelming, and that was something that I certainly wasn't expecting when I first started out. I also didn't really intend that my work would be so great in the memory area and doing replicas of people who'd lost their pets. So people cry when they come to pick up their animals, or sometimes I'll be sending them, and the messages that I receive, it just it makes my job very worthwhile. It's a very satisfying line of work to be doing.
Yes. Now, without giving away secrets, but in general terms, so you're felting, right?
Yes, it's dry needle felting.
Yeah, and then what are you building the little fellows around? So what?
Okay, so what I start off with is a wire armature. So that is a wire structure that are the proportions of the beast that I'm making, and then I'll wrap pipe cleaners around that so that the wool can grip onto that, and then it's just basically a case of wrapping wool around and stabbing with the needle. And
the colours match the colours of the pet, the animal that you are replicating.
Yeah, they do. So I mean that's the artistic side for me, that I'm challenging myself with looking at what colours, and actually it's not just the colours, John, it's what type of fibre suits that animal's fur the best. So I mean I mainly work in wool, but I also use alpaca and mohair, angora, silk, bamboo, a number of different fibres. The really important thing is that these fibres need to have the barbs on each piece of the fibre. Imagine if you look under a microscope, piece of human hair, how it's got those the shaggy, not shaggy. The fibre, the barbs on the actual fibre itself, and so that's what's really important.
Gosh, is it really labour intensive?
Oh, it's hugely labour intensive.
How long per replica?
At least 2, if not 3 days of work. Yeah, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of stabs in and out, and it's you need to have good patience to be doing what I do.
Yes. Yeah.
And an attention to detail, that's really important as well.
Yeah. And why do you think they work? Is because, taxidermy, I mean, I don't know, forgive me if you're listening to this interview and you've had a pet done by a taxidermist, but they just scare the hell out of me, taxidermied pets, because they look so thoroughly dead, don't they?
Well, funnily enough, John, a couple of years ago I had a temporary job as a taxidermy artist.
Yeah.
So that's the ironic thing about what I've led to now. But taxidermists in New Zealand particularly don't like to stuff pets.
No, well, that's what it is, isn't it? It's a stuffed pet. Whereas what yours is this that the cuteness, the sense of, I don't know, what makes pets joyful is somehow innate in your replicas, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I'm not just trying to copy what that breed looks like. I'm actually trying to copy that specific animal and even try and capture their character and their personality. I use a lot of photo references to work from, and I'm constantly looking at those. And it's also really great for my customers to give me a good description of what their pet was like. because that really helps me. I guess I kind of feel it as I go.
They're absolutely delightful, those things. You can see them on our website, those photos on our website. Whanganui State of Emergency, Don't Tell Me This Rain is another 100-year event. Should be a 1 and 3 week event. Yes, good point.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. People in Whanganui are being told to brace themselves for flooding that authorities fear will be worse than the devastating 2015 flood. The Mayor, Hamish McDougall, is telling residents in the flood zone areas they should leave their houses by 10 tomorrow morning. Modelling done by the council suggests the Whanganui River will rise to 17.7 metres by 1 tomorrow afternoon, 2 metres higher than in 2015 when 250 people were evacuated. Mr McDougall says it's inevitable the city will get flooding, expected to be at its worst by between 7 and midnight tomorrow. He says every school in the city should be closed. And people in the South Taranaki settlement of Waitotara are being told to be ready to evacuate their homes if the river there continues to rise tonight. It's been raining steadily all day and the Waitotara River has been rising noticeably, but Taranaki Civil Defence says an evacuation notice is not considered necessary at this stage. A local man, Aaron Fitter, says he's packed and ready to be out of his Kaiapō street home in minutes if he has to. But Mr Fitter hopes he won't have to endure yet another flood after the South Taranaki District Council revised its peak for the Waitotara River from 16 metres to 10. The settlement was flooded in 2015 when the river peaked at 15 metres. Mr Fitter says he's not taking anything for granted because residents were given the all clear in 2015 too. The family of a woman who died of typhoid last week says they found out she had the disease only in a media release this morning. The woman was one of at least 15 people with typhoid after an outbreak of the disease in Auckland in the past 10 days or so. A spokesperson for the family, Jerome Mika, told Checkpoint they feel the Auckland Regional Public Health Service has failed them.
We're really disappointed at the fact that just the awareness of of typhoid was not sort of registered on the radar of our family members, and a lot of them are quite shocked in terms of working through that and then asking whether my aunties or uncles were exposed to that. All that stuff wasn't communicated.
Jerome Mika says extended family members were only told at the woman's funeral today she had died of typhoid. The head of the health service, Julia Peters, says the doctors looking after the woman in hospital should have told her family she had died of typhoid. Dr Peters says it was then up to the family to share that information. She says the Public Health Service is not allowed to give out personal, private information. A New Zealand woman who drowned along with 2 of her children in northern New South Wales has been hailed as a hero. Stephanie King, who was 43, lived in the town of Bilambil but grew up in Auckland. She and 3 of her children were driving along the flood-swollen river at Timbulgum yesterday afternoon when their car plunged into the water. One of her daughters managed to escape. Police Superintendent Wayne Starling says it's an absolute tragedy.
The mother's a remarkable woman. We all have accidents, they just die of consequences on this occasion. The road's just so slippery over there. She died trying to save a child. Whilst the matter's going before the coroner, I've got no doubt whatsoever that that woman is a hero, and she'd be alive today if she wasn't trying to save her children.
Superintendent Wayne Sterling. The close-knit community is supporting Ms King's partner, Matt Cabiallo, who is a chef. A woman who's suing the Labour leader Andrew Little for defamation has told a jury she declined his initial settlement offer of $26,000. The case in the High Court in Wellington relates to Mr Little's release of a press statement and subsequent new conferences linking the award of a resort management contract to Earl and Lani Hageman's Scenic Hotel Group and the couple's donation to the National Party in September 2014. Mrs Hageman denied she wanted to bankrupt the opposition leader. She told the jurors she's fighting to restore the reputation of her dying husband, and she wanted the jury to award as much of the maximum sought, $1 million for herself and for her 91-year-old husband, as they think appropriate.
Mr. Little has had every opportunity for 12 months to come back to me. I just have no understanding how you can stand here to try and make me out to be a really bad person, because I think we should ask for damages when he's had every opportunity to do it for next to nothing.
Lani Hagerman has now finished giving evidence. The Church of England is embroiled in a row with Cadbury over an Easter egg hunt. The Archbishop of York, John Campbell, is accusing the chocolate maker of removing references to Easter in the egg hunt it runs with conservation charity the National Trust. Cadbury, which was founded by the Quaker John Campbell in 1824, says it invites all people, religious or not, to enjoy its seasonal treats. The National Trust says suggestions the significance of Easter is being downplayed are nonsense. Cadbury's website refers to Easter in relation to the hunt, but the word does not feature on the logo for the event. It's 6:05. The Warriors playmaker Kieran Foran has been named to start against the team he walked out on last year, the Parramatta Eels, in Sunday's NRL match at Mount Smart Stadium. Foran made his long-awaited debut for the Warriors in their 28-22 victory over the Gold Coast Titans last weekend. The 26-year-old left the Eels last year after suffering a season-ending shoulder injury as well as personal issues. Meanwhile, the Australian Test halfback Cooper Cronk has set the scene for a bidding war among Sydney NRL clubs after announcing he'll leave Melbourne at the end of the season. The two-time Dally M medal winner said family reasons were behind the decision to leave the Storm after 14 seasons, indicating he'll move to Sydney. The All Blacks midfielder Sonny Bill Williams could make a return to the rugby field this week after 8 months off, but a foot twinge could jeopardise his start. Williams has been out of action since rupturing his Achilles tendon during the All Blacks Sevens Rio Olympics campaign. Sally Murphy reports.
While Sonny Bill Williams is considered fit to play for the Blues in this weekend's Super Rugby match against the Highlanders in Dunedin, a minor foot injury could hold his return for another week. The Blues coach, Tana Umanga, will be hoping that's not the case after losing both first five Ihaya West and fellow midfielder Renee Ranger to ankle injuries at the weekend. The 23-man team will be named on Thursday. This is Sally Murphy.
And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the Kiwi-born engineer Catherine Moore. Creating surgical robots is her specialty. I've spoken with her about that before, but I haven't asked her about her role at Singularity University. Is she preparing for the digital end time? And this week's pundit is the critic Hamish Keith. Lindau could be on the agenda. Why does he bring out the thief in some art lovers? On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and there are severe weather warnings and watches in place for northern and central New Zealand. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Rain heavy at times with localised downpours and possible squally thunderstorms tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain with heavy falls easing tomorrow morning. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington and Wairarapa, rain with heavy falls. Southeast gales in exposed places easing tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, rain becoming widespread overnight and southeasterlies rising to gale. Heavy falls tomorrow. Westland, fine today, rain tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, mostly cloudy today with patchy drizzle in Canterbury. Widespread rain developing tomorrow, heavy in Canterbury. Snow lowering to 900 metres late tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland, mostly fine weather, and the Chatham Islands, mainly fine today, rain tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
The weather truly is abysmal in lots of places.
It really is.
And the message from Civil Defence is, if in doubt, check it out. Please keep an eye on their website or their social media pages. The situation is changing fast and the rain is very, very heavy in some spots. Today, Auckland health authorities have been widely criticised for communication issues around the typhoid outbreak. There are now 15 people with typhoid, including a 52-year-old woman who died with the disease last Tuesday. She died with it. There is some confusion as to whether the disease was the cause of death. Her death wasn't made public, until today, a week after she died. Health Minister Jonathan Coleman says his ministry was only informed of the outbreak 3 days later, last Friday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Jerome Mika, spokesperson for the family of the 52-year-old woman who died, told me public health officials effectively didn't communicate effectively.
I think that the Ministry of Health have failed not only the family, the immediate family, but also just the extended family. And from what I understand, even the undertaker wasn't aware that the person had died of typhoid.
And people were visiting her in hospital, holding her hand, wiping her brow, all those sorts of very human things?
I know the family members did, and I think the question is because there were people that were there with her when she was alive, were also at the funeral. So we're still trying to understand the extent of whether people have been exposed to typhoid. And as we speak, there are family members and church members going to contact their GP and visiting just to understand whether they were exposed to typhoid. So it's really, really disappointing, the fact that they failed to notify and communicate that to not only the immediate and extended family, but also the church family that were there to grieve their loved one at the church service. You know, a lot of people weren't aware of this.
Jerome Mika. So, he says the first many of the family of the deceased woman knew that she had died of typhoid was via a media release today. But the clinical director of the Auckland Regional Public Health Service, Dr. Julia Peters, says the service's role is to figure out how the infection started and stop it spreading.
What their activities were and with whom they were in contact in the incubation period for the disease. So
right. So you did that?
So just let me finish. We get notifications every day like this. I mean, not ones tragically that end like this. And that is our role. When obviously a person is alive, we interview them and we get the contact from them. When we knew that this outbreak was not just, when we knew the people were affected, that it was more than just sporadic cases, that there was an outbreak, we notified all the health services in Auckland and we notified the public through a media statement on Friday night. Now, in terms of, so anyone who has been a close contact of people who are cases in this outbreak will be hearing from our team. If they haven't heard from our team, it's because their name hasn't been provided to us.
Dr. Julia Peters. The typhoid outbreak has left us with lots of questions about the infection itself, like how prevalent is it, how hard is it to treat, and is it hard to prevent its spreading? Here's our reporter Zach Fleming with some of the answers.
In 1875, more than 300 people died from typhoid in New Zealand. Then, modern inventions we take for granted gradually brought us to present day, where deaths are rare and only around 50 to 70 cases are treated here every year.
We are lucky to have that great invention, which is the flushing toilet.
That's Dr. Sarah Dunstan from the University of Melbourne, a leading typhoid expert. She credits a rapid progression of water treatment and sewerage systems with the decrease in the number of people contracting the disease.
In developing countries, it is still a huge problem, and it still infects over 25 million people annually around the world.
It's travelled to and from developing areas like India, Southeast Asia and parts of the Pacific that are to blame for typhoid cases, made worse by the fact it can sometimes incubate for a month before symptoms present. Otago University's John Crump, who's part of a team that was given nearly $500,000 by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to study typhoid, says cases are often isolated in New Zealand, with person-to-person direct transmission rare. It's instead mainly spread by food and water contaminated by infected faeces.
Outbreaks in places like New Zealand tend to be small and associated with single contamination events and therefore easy to contain.
And deaths are very rare here. An outbreak in Kaikoura in 1947 led to 3 deaths from 78 infections. And more recently, in 2011, around $800,000 worth of kiwi fruit were destroyed after it was discovered a picker from Samoa had typhoid. Professor Michael Baker, an infectious diseases expert from Otago University, says in the worst cases, typhoid can lead to organ shutdown.
You can die from shock, basically,
it's a serious bacterial infection, so it can become a systemic infection, in other words, affecting many organs in your body, just like other serious invasive bacterial diseases.
Vaccinations aren't standard unless you're travelling to a country where typhoid is common, but at best, current ones are only 70% effective and cost around $150.
A capsule around the bacteria is what actually makes up the vaccine. But it's only part of the bacteria, and so therefore the immune response that it develops is probably not as effective as if you had multiple parts of the actual bacterium in the vaccine.
Dr. Dunstan is leading the hunt for a better one. In 2014, she located a gene some people are born with that makes them 5 times less likely to catch typhoid. In the meantime, though, it's possible typhoid could become harder to treat.
Multiple drug-resistant strains are being identified, and also that they are being identified in multiple countries.
Dr. Dunstan and Professors Baker and Crump all say it's unlikely the current outbreak will spread beyond those already infected. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
6:15, Don Brash and Tariana Turia are unlikely bedfellows. You can say that again. But the former party leaders from opposite ends of the political spectrum are among the 27 politicians and academics who've signed an open letter saying free speech is under threat at universities. Our reporter Eva Corlett has been taking a look at the letter and at their concerns.
The letter penned by Auckland University of Technology Professor Paul Moon says universities are institutions for robust debate and not the forceful silencing of dissenting or unpopular views. Sir Bob Jones, Albert Wendt and Sir Toby Curtis have signed it, along with former ACT leader Don Brash and former Māori Party co-leader Tariana Turia. While the letter doesn't cite any specific examples of New Zealand universities curtailing freedom of speech, many of the signatories pointed to international concerns. Mr Moon says he's worried New Zealand will follow the lead of universities in Britain and America, where he says there are growing restrictions on free speech. Don Brash agrees.
We've seen some very dangerous trends, I think, in the United States in the last few months and year or two, where people are trying to shut down views with which they disagree. And I think for a university particularly, that's a very undesirable trend.
Dr Brash says freedom of expression should only be restricted when there are threats of physical violence. The letter says ideas should not be suppressed because they're deemed offensive, unwise or wrong. Dame Leslie Max says she signed the letter because she believes that's an important principle.
I think of universities as places where rational interaction takes place, where people can speak and others can politely, civilly question them, challenge them, offer alternate views. But to silence speech by vandalistic behaviour, I think is quite appalling.
Dame Leslie says vulnerable people are better protected through civil dialogue than a mob mentality. She says talking about the issue now is a preventative measure against future censorship.
These phenomena are global, and I think it's wise that we look ahead and we try to preserve civil discourse on university campuses.
Dame Leslie says the wide net of people who have signed the letter, from all parts of the political spectrum, shows how important the issue is. The Director of Diversity at Auckland University of Technology, Edwina Pio, says the letter acts as a timely reminder to think about how universities should monitor ideas within their walls.
The university's role is robust research, respecting the honour and dignity of all who form part of the university community, both internal and external stakeholders, and creating an environment which encourages people to come to the table to talk about things in a way that is assertive, not aggressive.
The Prime Minister, Bill English, says he doesn't believe there is a problem of censorship in New Zealand universities.
In New Zealand we have a pretty tolerant public discussion. Occasionally there's some pretty strong views expressed. I think it's important that they're able to be expressed.
Mr English says there is no need for new hate speech legislation. The Race Relations Commissioner Susan Devoy announced in January she wants a review of legislation dealing with hate speech following a rise in what she describes as vile, vitriolic and very threatening language online. Mr Moon says the letter will be sent to leaders of political parties tomorrow. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Eva Corlett tēnei.
An affordable housing trust in Queenstown says it's been contacted by 20 new families a month needing accommodation and it can't keep up with demand. On Sunday, the Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust is officially opening a development with 44 affordable houses. It's built in a new subdivision called Shotover Country. The average purchase price for a house in the resort town has already topped $1 million. The Trust's executive officer, Julie Scott, says the problem has now flowed down and created a severe rental crisis for working families. That's leading to cases like a Queenstown waitress and her 7-year-old daughter who are paying $450 a week to share a house with 4 young workers being kept awake by their late-night drinking sessions and the sound of people having sex. Julie Scott told our reporter Ian Telfer that the rental crisis is getting worse fast.
12, 18 months ago, we weren't seeing anything like what we're seeing now. It's not just affordability in terms of buying a property, but it's also in terms of securing a rental property. There's just so few rental properties available, and unfortunately it's a supply and demand thing, so a lot of landlords are putting their prices up to just extremely high rents, which are unachievable for low to moderate income workers. So then you're getting the issue of overcrowding as people try and cram as many people as they can into the house to make the rent.
Yeah, and so then you're being contacted by them at that point, are you?
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of people coming to us, a lot of people we're seeing, families who have been renting for 5, 10, even 20 years in Queenstown, and they're coming through to us now and saying, you know, my rent's gone from $450 last year to $750, and we just can't afford that on our income, and we don't know what to do. We're going to have to leave town if we can't find anywhere else. So that's what we're seeing a lot of.
I guess it hasn't been a cheap place to live for quite a while, but it's been getting worse pretty fast, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's never been a cheap place to live, but the problem has got incredibly worse over the last 12 to 18 months.
And what's just because of the housing price boom?
Yeah, the housing price boom, and I think the population is growing at a level with supply of housing which is unable to keep up with the population growth.
And what, it falls hardest on families and people at the bottom?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I mean, it's easy enough for transient workers to, even though it's not ideal, it's certainly easier for them to put more people into one property, if sharing rooms, that type of thing. But that's not really practical or desirable for families with small children, so it's putting the pressure on them.
There was a case recently, they got some publicity of a woman who's living with her daughter in what effectively an overcrowded place. Are you seeing more of these kinds of stories now?
Yeah, absolutely. And that particular woman, she's at the top of our list, our waiting list. We have prioritised her, so we're just waiting for properties to come up, and then we'll be able to help her into a property. So we know who these people are, who are perhaps on the government housing register, and they're hopefully also on our housing register, and we can assist them. But there's more and more coming online every day.
In Telfer with that interview. It's 6:22. We're going to go to St Petersburg now. 3 days of mourning are underway in the city after an attack on the city's metro. 11 people were killed and more than 50 injured when a blast rocked a train carriage between stations. All of Russia has now been put on high alert. The BBC's Stephen Rosenberg has this report.
A woman is shouting, "Are there any children?" A train carriage torn to shreds and a desperate effort to pull people from the wreckage. At least 10 passengers were killed today and dozens more wounded. The blast occurred in the tunnel, but the wrecked train sped on and managed to reach the next station. This was the scene one stop behind, the platform filled with thick, choking smoke and the stench of explosives.
There was a huge bang. It was deafening. I was sitting next to a metal railing and I think it saved my life. Everyone was knocked in one direction by the blast.
The emergency services were on the scene fast, and from this underground hell, the wounded were helped to the surface and to safety. Adding to their physical injuries was a deep sense of shock at what had happened. A spokesman for Russia's anti-terrorism committee said the train had been blown up by an unknown explosive device. Special units of the security forces, he said, were being dispatched. The St. Petersburg metro went into emergency lockdown. All passengers evacuated, all stations closed and searched.
Later, it was revealed that an explosive device had been discovered at another metro station in St. Petersburg. This one was made safe. It was confirmation that today's explosion had been a deliberate attack.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin was in St. Petersburg today. His meeting with the President of Belarus overshadowed by the tragedy across town. The police and special services would do all they could to find the cause of what happened, President Putin said, and he promised support for the families of the victims. Russia says this was an act of terror. So who carried it out? Russia has made enemies with its bombing campaign in Syria. In recent years, the country has been targeted by Islamist terrorists. In 2015, a plane carrying Russian holidaymakers was blown up over Sinai, killing 217 passengers and crew. So-called Islamic State said it's planted the bomb. The Russian President, Vladimir Putin, visited the metro station where the bombed train had ended its journey and paid his respects. For the victims of this attack, St. Petersburg has declared 3 days of mourning. The metro is the lifeblood of this city. An act of terror on a train has left people here fearing more violence.
Steve Rosenberg, and in breaking news, the security service in the former Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan have identified the suspect in the St. Petersburg attack as Akbarjan Jalilov. He is a 23-year-old Russian citizen born in Kazakhstan. That just in, 23-year-old. We turn now to sport, rugby, and something that may give us pleasure in the context of our rivalry with Australia, but won't give true rugby lovers great pleasure at all, the fall and fall of Australian rugby. Setting aside the nonsense conference system that puts a team that's played 5 games and won only 2 ahead of a team that's played 5 games and won 5, in real terms there isn't an Australian team in Super Rugby's top 10. Once in an age of Nick Farr-Jones and David Campese and Michael Lynagh, Australian rugby inspired admiration, awe and even envy. Now you just want to give them a consoling hug. Alan Jones, who coached those men in the Wallabies, says kids have stopped playing the game at school, which means junior rugby isn't feeding the grown-up stuff. He says the people running the game in Australia don't have a clue what they are doing. And the result?
Terrible trouble. I mean, the results speak for themselves. I mean, we've barely won a game in Super Rugby. The provincial standard is terrible. And the problem is that the people presiding over it continue on as if nothing's going wrong. I think we've gone mad. The game is over. It's game, set, match. And this is reflected in the kind of rugby we're playing and the kind of results we're getting. Nothing wrong with the boys. I mean, we've got talented players here. But the people who appoint the coaches have never coached themselves, and nor do they ask anyone who might have coached. And so my view is that we've all got the wrong people coaching the teams to start with. Most of these things are a product of coaching. We spend all our time in the gymnasium and pushing up weights and all that sort of stuff, when in fact we should be focusing, as New Zealand do, on skills. I mean, some of the work we saw at the weekend was beautiful. The transfer of the football under pressure. You only get that by practicing that in training. Now, we train without a football. Look, we're in a mess. And there was a time when, as you know, New Zealand and Queensland, New South Wales and Queensland, were the 2 leading provincial sides in the world, notwithstanding Canterbury and Wellington and Waikato and Manawatu. And I mean, we took all of those on and beat them. Now, you wouldn't sort of dare mention yourself in the same breath.
Alan Jones says they do still have some fine players in Australia, but schools and clubs have to be stronger to create excellence that will rise to the top, and many people running the game and coaching the game aren't up to it.
It is the way we're being coached. There are too many coaches. I mean, we've got a head coach, a backs coach, a forwards coach, a kicking coach, a skills coach, a technical coach, a throwing coach, a psychologist. Oh, God, don't start me. I mean, it's a waste of dough, a waste of money in the total bureaucratisation of the game. So you've got to start in the schools. You've got to start with the coaching. We aren't appointing the right people as coaches. and we're not playing the right kind of football. Now, you've only got to pick up a video and have a look at the way Canterbury play or the Hurricanes play or, you know, all of those New Zealand sides, and there's Australia got a coaching manual. But the notion that Australia should be taught how to play the game by someone else is itself laughable. I'm not giving myself a rap here, but when I was coaching Australia, the whole world said, we want to play the way Australia's playing. Now, we're just bringing up the rear. So there are massive, massive problems here, not the least of which is money. I mean, we're losing money every time we put a team on the paddock. Now, the poor old Waratahs, they call them, New South Wales, are off to play Wellington. Good luck in Wellington. I mean, it's going to get worse rather than better.
Alan Jones, with his usual ability to cut to the chase, speaking to us from Australia. Just before we go tonight, it looks like there are flooding problems in Auckland as well. Fire Communications say it's dealing with multiple flooding incidents. The worsted areas are in the eastern suburbs and Waiheke Island. It's asking people to be patient when ringing for updates. It is raining hard in lots of places. Take care. We hope to see you tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. People in Whanganui are being told to brace themselves for flooding that authorities fear will be worse than the devastating 2015 flood. The family of a woman who died of typhoid last week says they found out she had the disease only in a media release this morning. A person is in a critical condition after what the police are calling a serious incident at Pakuranga Heights in East Auckland home. And a driver has died at the scene of a truck and car collision near Matamata. Our next news and weather is at 7.
They're the only ones who know
New Zealand was on its bended knee.
what it means to run the country.
Our economy was in the wrecking yard.
New Zealand's Prime Ministers talk about the choices that shaped a nation.
We would make the decision which ships to let in.
This week, Jeffrey Palmer and the revolution